Good afternoon and welcome to today's NHS Confederation Civic University Network webinar, which we have called From Imagination to Implementation, the Future of NHS and University Collaboration. My name is Michael Wood. I'm Head of Health Economic Partnerships at the NHS Confederation, which is a national membership body for the range of NHS organisations. And my role is focused on the links between the NHS and the local economy. I also sit on the advisory group for the Civic University Network. A little bit of housekeeping from me before we start today's session. We're recording the session and we'll make the recording and the slides available after the event. We've got the Q&A function, which is live to ask your questions to our panel, which we will put to them after their case study presentations. And we've also got a chat function. Please do feel free to use the chat function just to connect with each other and to provide some commentary as we go through today. So I'm really delighted to be co-chairing today's session with Professor Jane Robinson, Pro-Vice Chancellor for Engagement and Place at Newcastle University, and someone I've worked with closely for a number of years. It'll be something of a double act, so I will guide us through the intro of the presentations, and I'll pass to Jane, who will lead the open discussion and the Q&A after the presentations. Speaking of those presentations, we have three really excellent case studies where we're going to hear jointly from NHS and university leaders on their particular collaborative journey in their part of the world. We're going to start up in the northeast, move down towards Kiel before finishing in Gloucestershire. And I will introduce our speaker pairs as we go on. Before I introduce the colleagues from the northeast who will be kicking off the case studies, I just wanted to say a few words about this university NHS relationship in general. So last November, the NHS Confederation and the Civic University Network jointly published Reimagining the Relationship Between Universities and the NHS, a guide for building and sustaining local place-based collaborations. We'll put the link in the chat function. Please do have a read if you haven't read the report. Now, we focus on this relationship not because it wasn't strong, in fact, quite the opposite, given the collaboration we saw during the pandemic. I think what drove our work and what was driving lots of conversations between chief executives and vice chancellors, and also driving each other to ask challenging questions of each other, were a mixture of several factors. I think we saw the realization during the pandemic of just how fragile some of our communities were, and indeed still are. I think we saw that increased recognition that NHS organisations and universities are two of the biggest anchors in every local place or many local places, and had a real responsibility to support that local economic and social recovery. I think there's lots of commonalities about the need to better understand our communities and what we can do to support them. And also it's clear I work in health policy. Place is here to stay, I think, in policy making terms across our different sectors, which I think just reflects the need for that strong relationship between what we do with a focus on trust and some of those tangible outcomes. So a year ago, about this time, we started holding several leadership roundtables before publishing the report. And certainly what was striking, I felt, from both the NHS and from the university side, was the focus on pushing this relationship into new areas, asking how much we really knew of each other, asking whether we really were working in the best interest of our communities. And I won't elaborate, it's in the report, but the 5 key principles we identified to help rebuild that particular relationship were: collaborate and co-develop consistently, recognise our role as part of an anchor network, commit to building the future, prioritise inclusivity and measure impacts. They're the 5 key principles we put in there, and the link is in the chat function there. Since that publication last year, it's been really fantastic to see and actually to join in some of the conversations, local conversations about the nature, the breadth, the direction of local relationships. And certainly we've seen health as a common issue in Civic University Agreements up and down the country as they are being developed. As the title of the webinar today suggests, we're now looking at implementing that report, and we're really keen to hear from you about your own experiences too of working locally with your partner institution or organisations. So that brings me on to the examples today. I think we've got 3 different examples, we've got 3 different places, we've got slightly different priorities, but actually all, I think, talking to some extent about those key principles we identified in that report. So first of all, it gives me real pleasure to look up to the northeast and to introduce our first case study. Joining from the northeast, we have Professor Diane Ford, the Pro-Vice Chancellor of the Faculty of Health and Life Sciences at Northumbria University, and Martin Wilson, Chief Operating Officer at Newcastle Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust. Diane, Martin, please, over to you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to start and hand over to Diane, and I'm very privileged to work at Newcastle Hospitals, which has twice been rated by the Care Quality Commission as an outstanding organisation, thanks in no small part to the long track record of working with local universities. But we came to a recognition as an organisation a few years ago that it's not sufficient to be an amazing provider of healthcare. We need to do more than that. And indeed, across Newcastle, there's a 10-year difference in healthy life expectancy between different communities and a 5-year difference in healthy life expectancy with the England average. So we've come to the conclusion as a local place-based system that we need to be in the business of health, wealth and well-being, or in shorthand, about homes, jobs and friends, if we're going to help local people realise the future that they've got. So about 3 years ago now, we came together as a local system, including both universities, Northumbria, where Diane is, and Newcastle, where Jane is, to work together in the creation of Collaborative Newcastle. This is a formal legal partnership that exists between the NHS, the local council, and our universities on that agenda of health, wealth, and well-being. And we have 3 main pillars of work, where the universities and the NHS have got equal stake in all 3 of them. Those pillars are health and care, growth and prosperity, and the delivery of the net carbon zero ambition, which is really important for this city and for all of us. We also, because we've got 2 very high quality universities in the city, we're very fortunate that around 2 years ago now, we got an academic health science centre registration for the city, and that works very closely with Collaborative Newcastle. From my point of view in the hospital, though, I just want to give 2 or 3 examples of areas of work where the universities have been really fundamental to our the contribution we are playing in this wider agenda. The first one that I'll draw out starts actually long after the kind of normal work around universities collaborating and generating our workforce of the future and supporting our workforce of today. And it was at the start of the pandemic when we were asked to create Nightingale hospitals right across the country. And literally one Friday night at 11 o'clock, we got a text from our regional director to ask us to create a 4,000 bedded hospital within 2 weeks. Had it not been for the nature already and the recognition of the different complementary skills that exist within our universities and the NHS, we would have built a 4,000 bedded hospital for the wrong purpose and for the wrong patient group. But because of the quality of the analytics function and their ability to mobilise teams within the university, they were able to prove to us that that wasn't what was needed. We needed something that was far smaller in benefit. And it led to the creation of a 480 bedded critical care hospital within 3 weeks to serve the North East. Now, I'm fortunate to say that that hospital was never required to be used for that purpose, but what it did demonstrate through the responsiveness of colleagues in the universities, how quickly and well we could work together in tackling new problems. And so it was no surprise that Newcastle came together as Collaborative Newcastle and bid in the middle of the pandemic to create another part of the COVID response, which was the integrated COVID hub for the North East. This was doing PCR testing, bringing together the best of science, flexible workforce, and the NHS to do that. And we were able, as part of that scheme, to create an innovation lab, which has not only generated jobs, but long-term future prospects around how we can create more science opportunities within the system, and generated new workforce futures. But also what it let us do was challenge our thinking about where do we recruit workforce from? And through a very different approach to typical NHS recruitment, using our better understanding of communities across the city, supported by data from the universities, we were able to target our jobs to deprived communities, which going right back to where Collaborative Newcastle started about homes, jobs and friends was really important. And I'm pleased to say that of the jobs we created, 40% of 800 jobs that we created in the city, we were able to target to the most deprived communities in the city. That meant that we've had over 25% of people from minoritized ethnic communities, 15% from LGBT communities, and 12% from disabled communities. Take it from me that that's not normal for the NHS, certainly in this part of the world, and we're really proud of the learning that's given us and our ambition to go further. So we work closely together. We've also engaged one of the universities to do a follow-up study about what's the impact on people's wealth, health, and future prospects of having had jobs. And we're ambitious through Collaborative Newcastle about what the future would look like. But I just finished by saying it's not all sweetness and light. This is tough stuff. And with 2 universities in the city, often they've got different ideas together. So one of the things that I'm sure Diane will talk to you about is one of our ambitions in the city for health and social equity, and another one which Jane is leading on around our ambitions for ageing, really playing to the diverse and distinctive strengths of each of our 2 universities as part of the whole collaboration together. Diane.
Okay, thanks very much, Martin. So what I'll do now then is pick up and flesh out with sort of put more of a focus on what working together looks like now between Northumbria University and Newcastle Hospitals Trust, how we got there, and with a disclaimer that this is my personal view, what we probably need to be thinking about and where we need to go next. And I'll use some specific examples. But I'm very mindful that there's a great deal of working as partners between our two organisations across numerous strands of activity led by teams that don't necessarily involve the executive and the senior leadership. I'm always discovering stuff going on that I don't know about. So I think this is one of the challenges in a way that to optimising the real benefits of this kind of partnership working between such large organisations, sort of bringing it all under one umbrella in some way to avoid duplications, inconsistencies, and to see those gaps and new opportunities. But before I want to do this, I just want to reiterate or reinforce some of Martin's points about the importance of wider regional multi-stakeholder engagement. This isn't just about the partnership between our two organisations. If we really want to drive forward the important issues for society in the region and the regional economy, and I'm sure because you're joining this webinar today, you probably don't really need convincing of that, most of you. And Martin's already surfaced the sort of distinctive social demographics of our region. And I think there's another dimension there that's particularly distinctive in our region that gives us some real strength. And that's the strength of the two universities together now, which Martin did refer to. The results of the Research Excellence Framework just last month gave us the concrete evidence of what we already knew would be the point we would reach, which is we are a city now with two research-intensive universities, Newcastle University and my own university, Northumbria University, as a result of us having made the for the second time in the Research Exercise Framework, the biggest jump in research power. So we now sit at position 23 in that ranking with Newcastle at 15. And so we really are the first university to cross that divide, a post-92 research intensive university. And actually combined with Durham, ranked at position 20 for research power, we've now do actually boast the largest city area concentration of researchers outside of London. So we've got big challenges in the Northeast, and we've also got fantastic opportunities now through partnership working with all of our universities to address these challenges. So how did we get to where we are at the moment with our working with Newcastle Hospitals Trust? One of our longest established areas of partnership working, and one that remains ever essential and right at our forefront, is the placement of a very large proportion of our nursing, midwifery and allied health profession students. I'll refer to them as NMAP students. We've got about 4,000 of those at Northumbria University. We are a very large provider here for their clinical training placements. We've done that for years. We do work with other regional trusts as well, but the largest volume of our student placements is with Newcastle Hospitals Trust. And alongside this sort of education part of the relationship, we have a long history of providing CPD as well to the staff at Newcastle Hospitals Trust. And here, as I'm sure many colleagues on the call would be aware, there's a third partner who is crucial here to this relationship. That's Health Education England. And as many as you'll know, this is currently in the process of merging with NHS England and NHS Improvement to come under one body. But certainly over the timescale of my involvement in this space, which is about 6 years now, this has all been a learning journey. I am a professor of molecular nutrition, don't have a healthcare background until I took my current post about 6 years ago. This has always been a very interesting and in the best sense, not because anybody is deliberately being difficult, but quite a slippery and difficult tripartite arrangement that I don't have time to go into here, although I could. But so health education is sort of key glue in this dimension of the relationship, but also throws in quite a lot of challenges that we need to work through. And then also I'm going to talk about how we've begun to attempt to work more strategically together. Before that point, we were also involved in collaborative research and innovation, around clinical treatment, workforce strategy, and as Martin's we were also key partners, actually Martin didn't mention this one, in the NIHR funded North East and North Cumbria applied research collaboration. So we'd already started to do a bit more purposeful engagement around addressing some of the regional issues. But then in 2019, Northumbria University Executive, we reached out with probably a greater purpose than previously, aiming to establish a much more strategic working partnership with Newcastle Hospitals Trust. And this was at our VC CEO level. And we'd recognised that while the partnership between Newcastle University and the Trust was very well developed and well embedded, probably facilitated to an extent, and colleagues may comment on that, by the co-delivery of medical education for many years, and on the back of that, a very large body of collaborative medical research, and some of that funded by major initiatives, major investments from bodies such as NIHR, the MRC, and so on. We felt that at Northumbria University we had something complementary and distinctive to offer, and that being more strategic development of research and more strategic education and workforce development in the NMAP, nursing, midwifery, allied health professions area. So following an initial sort of high-level meeting at which both organisations signed up to the basic principle of developing a more strategic relationship, our Director of Strategic Development at Northumbria engaged with key stakeholders in both partners, subject specialists, and so on, to develop the blueprint for how we'd work together. We decided not to enter anything really formalised in legal terms, and indeed we even decided that a standard memorandum of understanding was probably an unnecessary focus of energy and time that we had. So, but we did develop a strategic work plan that encompassed 6 streams of activity and set specific objectives alongside those, and I'll touch on what they are if I have time, which I think I will, keeping my eye on the clock. But we didn't get as far as agreeing what the overall governance structure would look like. Clearly that would be important, but then this being 2019, as we moved into 2020, of course, COVID hit us, and as Martin's already mentioned, we found we did have to work together, but really in terms of our strategic partnership, finding the time and headspace for any of us to stick to the plan was really not possible. So, you know, we tended to get on with things in a slightly more reactive way. But then as things start to calm down a little bit, some of us, and it was probably those of us for whom some of these priorities that we'd scoped out were a bigger part of our day jobs, we regrouped to revisit these 6 priority areas, which I'll touch on. And we have continued to meet to monitor progress with regard to these, to reset the goalposts to see if we need to do that, and check if they're still the right things that we need to be doing together. The group's meeting quarterly now. It's now chaired by the head of department of our Nursing, Midwifery and Health department. And on there we have the chief executive nurse of the trust, her deputy. We have the deputy head of that nursing department, a couple of key colleagues, a director of practice placements, a head of clinical simulation, and then me. And so when we look at progress, I think we're probably both of the view that we've come a long way towards meeting some of the initial objectives in several of these areas. And we think generally we've got it right. You know, we are working in the areas that probably we can work collaboratively to benefit in. And these areas then are nurse and healthcare worker of the future, future workforce, research for excellence in healthcare, shared estate opportunities, collaboration in the international landscape, and then mental health and well-being. I don't have time to say much about all of these. I'll say a little more about some and not much more about others. Nurse and healthcare worker of the future and future workforce sounds a bit like the same thing, doesn't it? And we did revisit recently if these should remain as 2 separate work streams, but we decided they should. We have separate leads. We have leads who are not on that group, but other leads in the organisations, one from each partner on each group. So really what the nurse and healthcare worker of the future focuses on is developing the future NMAP pipeline and leadership, so work with schools and also working with our Northumbria cohort of students to inspire and promote the future clinical leaders from that group. Future workforce is more about working more strategically around CPD, really, and also other things like innovation around placement provision, including simulation. The research strand then is one area I'm particularly enthusiastic about and proud of what we've achieved together so far. And I'll mention two initiatives here, one being joint clinical academic contracts, and then also a new NMAP Researcher Development Institute. So the joint contracts are really something that appears to be quite a distinctive achievement in the sector, and this has been recognised externally. And we did this through a process of co-working between who became the two initial holders of these future contracts with support from leadership, including myself, and then the organisation's two respective HR departments who got together. And we now have got a contract which comprises a joint appointment agreement between all three parties, the university, the trust, and that clinical academic. So it works in that the academic has a substantive contract with one or other of the organisations and an honorary contract with the other. So when the trust is a substantive employer, the honorary contract with Northumbria University includes the joint academic terms and conditions. And when Northumbria University is the substantive employer, there's a joint clinical academic honorary contract where the same clinical academic terms and conditions are part of that. And then there are line managers in both organisations who work together to agree a common set of objectives that are monitored through the PDA, the Performance Development Review process. And this was actually shortlisted for the 2022 University HR Awards. We get quite a lot of interest from other HEIs who want to know how we did it. And for example, the UCEA Clinical Academic HWN Network also invited us to deliver a presentation in March on this. So quite pleased about this. Currently, we only have 3 such contracts, but we very much want to support and grow these. And we made our first professorial appointment to a joint contract in 2021. So it's still in early days, but I think we are seeing the benefits already. One of these being the rate of progress made with regard to the second of these research initiatives I mentioned, that the NMAP Researcher Development Institute. So this has been funded to a tune of 3.2 million by Newcastle Hospital's charity to support development of NMAP research capacity and capability within the trust. Northumbria University is a key partner. The PhD and also MRes students from the trust will register at Northumbria University. We will provide the education part. Awards will be made annually over the next 5 years to staff from the trust on a competitive basis, and colleagues at Northumbria University are involved in the selection of these students. How am I doing with time? Just a few more minutes left. I'll touch on collaboration in the international landscape. This brings me back, I think, to Martin's point about how we reacted quickly across universities and the NHS to get it right in terms of the Nightingale Hospital. So this is the example here, international then, is we responded very quickly at Northumbria University to encouragement by the trust to bid together as a partner for an invitation from the Nursing and Midwifery Council to expand the national capacity for conducting OSCEs, the clinical skills competence tests. And the Nursing and Midwifery Council required additional competence test centres to respond to the need to recruit trained nurses from overseas to meet the workforce demands, and indeed the government's target of increasing the nursing workforce by 50,000 by 2024. So we put in a bid, which was successful, and the contract with the NMC was signed in November 2021. This was all very fast. I think the bid went in late summer, and the centre is now open. It opened in March to its first fee-paying candidates. It's on Northumbria estate, and we are committed to delivering under contract 7,000 OSCE exams a year. That's about 650 a month. And this has support from Newcastle City Council as well, because of the benefits of bringing these visitors into our city. And it's a real potential boost there. We don't have any evidence of that yet, but to the local economy, things such as the hospitality and retail sector. It will attract more people into the city. So as I come towards the end, I'll close the loop with where I started, wider regional engagement. Martin mentioned that we have one of the 8 NIHR funded National Academic Health Science Centres here. This was awarded to a consortium of 5 organisations in which the university partner was Newcastle University. However, in recognition of the important, distinctive and complementary elements of research that Northumbria can bring to this partnership, we were invited, we might have muscled in a bit, but anyway, we were invited to become a formally recognised co-opted partner in 2021. And I've been personally very proactive here, actually, and I've personally done some of the heavy lifting work in ensuring that our university is visible, a valuable, actively participating partner. I am a great believer in leading by example. And I think for our engagement and partnership with the Trust to work to deliver maximum benefit, we need people and teams right across the organisation to really understand our joint objectives and work together. So I've invested some time in leading one of 6 work streams on one of 3 boards within this Academic Health Sciences Centre. And I think we've got quite a degree of traction now in terms of piloting some innovative multi-partner new staff roles, which I could say a bit more about, but I haven't time now. So finally, what next? We realised that our somewhat reactively shaped current partnership working group doesn't provide the right level of interaction to bring to the table the bigger initiatives for both organisations and the whole region, where we need to work in close partnership. And this has surfaced through a current major initiative, which Martin mentioned, of our university, a Centre for Health and Social Equity, CHASE being the acronym. And this has 4 major strategic aims developed from areas in which Northumbria University particularly has strength. And importantly, we see these as strengths that are complementary to, rather than in competition with, those that Newcastle University brings to regional partnerships in this space, for example, ageing. So because of time, I won't go through what these themes are. I could do that if people want to ask more questions about that. But where this has brought us, that we're at the moment in the process of reopening our discussions about how best to have higher level strategic governance over this wider partnership. So that brings me to the end of the time I've got, I think, and really what I wanted to present. So I hope that was of interest and invite some questions and stimulate some discussion. And thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Dan and Martin. Now, fascinating detail and rich detail in there, and just hearing about your journey, about coming back to those key themes, looking forward, the complementarity across different partners. Martin, I'm struck, working in the NHS, those of us in the NHS will know this isn't normal, I think is a quote for our times, Martin, isn't it? I'm sure you've used that on many occasions. So a fantastic example from the Northeast, and please do keep your questions and comments coming in. I'm sure that's given you plenty of food for thought about how that journey reflects your own journey in your part of the country. So please do keep your questions coming. Jane will lead on the question and answer session after. Now we're going to head south a bit now from the Northeast down towards the Midlands. And great pleasure to introduce Professor Krysia Zidzik, Director of Impact Accelerator Unit at Keele University, and also Ruth Lambley-Burke, the Head of Research and Innovation at the Midlands Partnership NHS Foundation Trust. Please, Krysia and Ruth, take us through your presentation.
Thank you so much, and it's really exciting to be here and part of this presentation. And Shireen is going to prepare the slides for us and very kindly take us through the slides. So I'm embedded in the university. I'm director of the Impact Accelerator Unit there, and Keele is really embedded within the Northwest Midlands, and that's our stomping ground. And I'm also an honorary implementation consultant with Ruth, and Ruth is going to pick up. I'm going to start off with an example from Keele, and then Ruth is going to pick up in terms of what's happening from the NHS as Head of Research and Innovation. So very excited, and we want to really share our perspectives on embedded integration work. Next slide, please. So the focus of my half of our double act is something that Keele has done for some years now around Keele deals. So Keele has set some deals in terms of a focus of work around industry, around culture, one on COVID recovery, and importantly around health. So I'm going to focus on Keele Deal Health itself. So this is very much an initiative that brings us together in this space between the university and our partners in health and care, and particularly finds a sweet spot where we can add value and amplify the strengths that we have for the benefit of our place in this arena. So Keele Deal Health was launched just before the pandemic, so we've been curating it through the pandemic as well. And it's about working together to address local and regional health and care challenges. Next slide, please. So clearly we didn't set out as a university to say, well, here's Keele Deal Health and off we go. We actually did consult our partners to work out, well, what is it that we want to focus on? So we listened to the priorities of our partners, patient service users and carers, and importantly also aligned our Keele Deal Health to Keele's strengths as well, and what we were delivering and what we were growing in and what we're known for. And these are the things that came out. So there was an ambition to get serious about prevention, to support people with health conditions, and this was across the life course, to evaluate new models of care, innovate for health and care, and improve productivity. Next slide, please. So what this ultimately gave us with a proposition around 3 core pillars that we will work together with. And I think iterating what has already been said, this isn't a new relationship. This is a relationship that's been formed over decades. So it's not surprising that we would choose areas where we'd already got a platform to build on, we'd already got strong relationships and track records. So the 3 areas for health and social care were around workforce challenges today and the future, collaborative research and innovation, and driving quality care through evidence-based service transformation. Now, for the purposes of this afternoon, I'm going to focus on one of those 3, and clearly Ruth will be focusing on the research and innovation part. So I'm going to focus on the evidence-based service transformation theme. Next slide. So one of the advantages at Keele is that we have an impact accelerator unit. And this unit has been developed from people who've naturally come together in the space between the university and health, where we can share expertise, joint appointments, patient and public involvement. And we set about co-production. We work hard to understand the context and the importance of what's happening in the health and care community. We're very keen to accelerate the uptake of high quality evidence into practice as a way of supporting quality of health and social care. And one of the other things that we're very keen on striving for is implementing, evaluating new models of care. So it seemed very natural as an impact accelerator unit to say, well, if there was one area that we were going to step into and work together to drive forward in collaboration with our partners, it was service transformation. Next slide, please. So the unit brings to the table some key ingredients, which I think really do help in this space and really do sort of challenge us to go the extra mile. So the unit has a vision and a passion for implementation of research into practice through knowledge mobilisation to create impact. So that's one of the ingredients that we bring. It also brings strong and belief in strong networks and communities with high performing individuals, but with a range of different skills working together in a multidisciplinary team. And that's also so important in this to lever change. And then there's this belief in inclusive patient and public involvement in all activities. Next slide. So the priorities emerged from a series of workshops that we held to launch Kiel Deal Service Transformation. And these are the things that came up. So the need for true collaborative working, tackling inequalities, addressing the information needs of local populations, empowering and supporting the public to self-manage health, having time to enable transformation to embed, and evaluating the impacts. And of course, all of that was in the need to recognise and support primary care services, particularly widening health inequalities and addressing those alongside the increasing mental health challenges. And all of this, as we launched, whilst the services were still managing COVID and the strain on the current and future workforce that comes with that. Next slide. So the solutions that came up from our communities of practice that we've met was this need to create a culture to enable us to tackle the top priorities. So that included greater use of our evidence into practice group, developing cross-organisational relationships, maximising innovative technology and offering staff development time, as well as creating evaluation strategies and collecting meaningful data. And while I've been speaking, if you have been admiring the teapot, which was created in the Potteries, which is the place where we are working thoroughly, you might have noticed Paddington Bear was drinking out of the spout when he was in having tea with the Queen. But the important message about that is to try and capture impact where you can see it. So next slide. What we have is for our service transformation is an impact bucket. It could be a horse bucket, it could be any sort of bucket, but we actually think of it as a champagne bucket. So any innovations that really talk to this and that there are new that we've really amplified as a result, we like to capture. And one of those is an NHS-funded programme of work led by the NHS, but supported by the university, to look at innovation for back pain using Kiel and other international research to see how that we could change and enhance the quality of care within pathways using a digital innovation. Next slide, please. So without doubt, none of this could happen without resources and support, and we've heard NIHR being mentioned as well. And there's a whole range of other funders and other agencies. Some are research funders and some are not research funders, but we're looking to lever resources from wherever we can find it, which is really important. Last slide, please, for me. So the last slide really was just to thank you so much for the opportunity to do the presentation in this today, and particularly fantastic opportunities for me to do a double act with Ruth. So I'm really excited about that as well. So I'll hand over to you, Ruth.
Thank you, Krisha, and I'm absolutely delighted to be with you all today and to share our experience of collaborations working with Kiel. I'm based at Midlands Partnership Foundation Trust, which is a trust that provides mental health, learning disability, adult social care services across Staffordshire, Stoke-on-Trent and Shropshire. We also provide services nationally, such as eating disorders, forensic services, and prison services. So a real big mixed bag from us. So I just wanted to say thank you. I'm excited to come and talk to you about our work that we've been doing. Our close working relationship with Kiel has been essential in co-creating opportunities, and working with Kiel has been enabled us to work with other partners too. We're keen to build on this. And in the presentation, I'm probably going to show you a bit more of a practical side to the work that we've been doing. We've been looking at working with our social care partners, looking at education and research, but I'm really going to share with you about our work where we're developing research within the integrated care systems within our region. And none of it would have been possible at all without the work that we've done and the shared risks and trust across the organisations. The projects I'm going to talk to you about are the Staffordshire and Shropshire Health Economy Research Partnership, which is a Sherpa project, the Social Care Project, which is a research engagement project with Social Care Screen, and STARS, supporting the advancement of research skills training programme. Next slide, please. So taking you through the background and aims of the project, we've achieved lots within our North West Midlands region, and we're really proud of that. and we've got a strong history of research, development and innovation. However, just 2 years ago, we saw an opportunity where we could develop a more collaborative research strategy across the region, and a bid was submitted to our clinical research network, which enabled us to take this forward. Myself and colleagues from Civic University, Professor Christian Mallon, the head of the medical school, went and met with each individual organisation to talk to them about how we could bid for funding and we could develop this strategy in a new way of working. Historically, within the teams that we work with within the portfolio research world, it's been quite competitive rather than collaborative due to funding, how funding is allocated to us. But this was a real opportunity for us to do things differently and look at a more unique way of working. On the slide, it talks you through some of our aims and where we're going to achieve that. We have the challenge of restructuring. The aim of working within our integrated care system is to move away from traditional ways of working, to enable us to work collaboratively, and to move away from the divisions of disjointed ways of working, particularly for our patients. The same could be said of our research. Organisations, as I said, have always worked independently, and there was a time for us to be able to change that. The ambition was to do more than just engage in research, but actually to make a difference to evidence-based commissioning and also to provision. And we know that others are doing this, and we know that others have probably done other ways of working and on their own journeys, but we wanted to share ours with you today. So I'm really excited, and like I said, thank you for enabling us to do that. Next slide, please. So the Sherpa projects, what did we do? Stage 1. So we established 2 steering groups. We brought together partners, got them talking, got them agreeing to think about how we could work collaboratively. How do we bring and retain the best workforce? How do we think about benefiting our patients? How do we bring work into the North West Midlands? How do we bring research and innovation into the North West Midlands? And how do we make it a better place for us to provide healthcare, but also for a better place to work? We established a project team, a programme lead, we established a project manager, and we started to create a team that could drive this forward. We developed a paper for the Integrated Care System Board and took that to the executive group, which was really positively received. And we did a mapping and gapping questionnaire across all of our partner organisations, and we had 100% positive response. So that went to our health and care partners and community providers, and people came back and it was really positive. There was an appetite to engage, people wanted to ensure that they were involved, and we had the opportunity with capacity to drive this agenda forward. It wasn't all plain sailing, we did have challenges, we did have some sticky wickets and sticky issues. Who would host, for instance? Well, for us, MPFT were the people that submitted the bid, so by default we decided that that would be the best place to host. We had competition versus recognition. We wanted to ensure that people still had their own work recognised, as well as having the opportunity to collaborate with us too. We had the challenge of thinking about how we could work across the health and social care sector, thinking about how can we support those organisations that perhaps didn't have a research infrastructure, such as the ones that we have within our traditional healthcare trusts. And we had to find the funding and the capacity to do that. Next slide, please. So what did we achieve? In stage 1, we managed to achieve that we set up these steering groups, which have now been adopted and taken on as the ICS Research and Innovation Committee. So we now have a reporting mechanism into the emerging integrated care system, working closely with the Chief Medical Officer in both sites. We cover 2 ICS systems across the North West Midlands, so it enabled us to work with those chief medical officers to ensure that research and innovation was embedded at the heart of the system as it was emerging. We had stakeholder buy-in across the system, so we had representation from both universities, Staffordshire and Civic University. We had secure funding there, and we had the programme in place, and we also achieved a communication strategy to ensure that everybody was aware of the work that we were driving. The pictures there are some of the colleagues that we work with, and we've got representation from the Clinical Research Network, the NIHR, the Academic Health Science Network, the local authority, social care, public health, primary care, Keele, just to name a few. So we really had buy-in from across the sector. So really great achievement for people to have a voice at the table. So what did we do next? We wanted to take forward, we got the communication strategy, we did the mapping and gapping questionnaire, we knew the areas we wanted to work on, what could we do now? And that's when we applied again for some further funding for Sherpa Part 2. And we were successful, which was fantastic because there was an appetite for the work that we were doing. And so we managed to get funding to achieve, to enable us to go forward into 2023 and to drive the programme of work. We then, next slide please, developed our membership further, and we had a real opportunity to align the activities to what the ICS would require, to develop shared programmes, to co-design opportunities for research and knowledge mobilisation, and work across organisational boundaries to identify and develop researchers of the future. So we've set up now task and finish groups for governance, shared workforce, digitalisation, information governance. These areas of work have been deemed the most important by the groups themselves. These are the areas that they want to look at to see how we can work smarter within the North West Midlands with Keele and with our other partners to make this happen. We've got opportunities to support the local authorities, for instance, where they may not have the infrastructure there to deliver research. We're submitting grants together. We're looking at grants which are relevant to, Krisha just mentions the digitalisation project. We've got another project that's just coming through where all partners are involved. It's a real exciting project. Whether we will be successful, who knows, but we've got the voice, the enthusiasm, and we've got membership from across the system. And we're tackling, more importantly, the ICS priorities. So what is going to be needed for us within our region? Next slide, please. I'm just going to quickly talk to you now about a couple of the projects that sit within that programme of work. So the SCREEN project, which is the social care engagement project, is again in collaboration with Keele. And that's where we're working across the system, sharing how we can work with our local authorities differently, and how we can offer training opportunities as well. So next slide, please. So what is the SCREEN project? The SCREEN project was established in 2020, and it was to provide structure to our social care organisations to upskill and to upscale their research engagement capacity. So we looked at how we could provide support and guidance. With Keele, we undertook a 200 survey across the social care sector. And we undertook a publication within the British Social Care Journal, and we formed a special interest group, which was intended and led by social care experts, and we had worked in partnership with Keele to develop a real interest in work there. We secured career development awards for 2 practitioners. We started off with a baseline of 0. We hadn't got any research going on within our social care area at all. To have and be successful with two calls, so we've got a social care call and a personal development award to enable 2 social care workers to develop their own research in their own areas is quite unique. And we've been able to secure grant applications. They're named on grants, they're looking at their own areas, and we've been contacted now by Social Care Wales, the West Midlands Association for Directors of Adult Social Services, and also Cornwall, to think about how we started on our journey and what lessons can be learned from us and how we can collaborate with them further. And none of this would have been enabled if it wasn't for Keele, the mentorship, the guidance and the support when we're in developing our research, but also developing the careers of those social care workers and the mentorship provided, which was absolutely instrumental. Next slide, please. We also have the STARS programme, and the STARS programme is supporting the advancement of research skills. This was a programme that we developed within the Trust in 2020, and it was really to enable any member of staff, whether it's corporate or clinical, to be able to take part in research. And these workshops and seminars were developed and led by Keele and MPFT. We fast forward to now, and this programme is now being trialled in our superstars, which is our testbed sites, and that is part of the system work. So we're offering the STARS programme in partnership with Keele to our social care colleagues, primary care colleagues and public health colleagues. And so far we've got, I think it's 14 or 15 sub-sites set up, and they're going to have access to the STARS programme. The next step for us then would be the Future Learn programme, which is where we put all of this work online. We've been secured funding from the Clinical Research Network to enable us to do that. And then that course will be free, enabling everyone within the North West Midlands access to this training course. The STARS programme is an online course of expert-led workshops. It's been led and in true partnership with Civic University. And it really gives an opportunity for any member of staff to learn a little bit more about research. We provide a mentorship, we provide development awards, and it really gives everyone an opportunity to get involved and to understand more. Next slide, please. And I, like Krisha, I think I need to acknowledge all of our colleagues, because particularly within the Sherpa project, there's a number of colleagues we need to thank for their involvement. I'd like to acknowledge Keele, because they've been the true partner and key to us being successful in any of these pieces of work. And I hope that really gives you an understanding of some of the work that we've done, and some real practical examples from myself of how we've embedded research across the system and within the organisation, within the North West Midlands. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ruth and Chrissia, and you know, fantastic examples. I think the Keele deal has really helped put Keele on the map. And Ruth, you know, I think there'll be common questions about research and ICSs. You know, that's something I certainly get asked in my role. And so great that you've started that conversation, Ruth. No doubt we'll come back to that in the Q&A session. And please do keep your Q&As, your questions coming for Jane afterwards. And our final destination today for our case studies is Gloucestershire. And it's a pleasure to introduce Lorraine Dixon, Head of Health and Social Care School at the University of Gloucestershire, and Tracy Cox, the Interim Director of People, Culture and Engagement at the Integrated Care System for Gloucestershire. Please, Lorraine and Tracy, over to you both.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm going to kick off on behalf of Gloucestershire. As you'll see, my role is the Director of People, Culture and Engagement in Gloucestershire. So obviously a key part of my responsibility, this is a new role for Gloucestershire, and part of my responsibility is obviously to help with the development of a people strategy for our wider system. But it's also about our relationship and engagement, particularly with our university, both on that journey, but also in regards to some wider kind of collaborative ventures that we've got going. I'm going to just give you a little bit of an overview of Gloucestershire, really, to kick us off, and really sort of set out the case for collaboration, which I'm sure I won't need to convince you of too much. So if I just have our first slide, please. So this is Gloucestershire. We have a population of just over 650,000. We are an interesting county. We have generally considered to be a relatively affluent county, but there are some of our neighbourhoods are very, very deprived. And like many health and care systems, as we kind of go forward into the new ICS context, what we are really, really clear is that we've got a lot of unwarranted and avoidable variation in health outcomes. As I said, 8% of our county's population are amongst the most deprived 20% of people nationally in England. And like many systems, we have significant challenges around an ageing population. The number of people over 65 in Gloucestershire is predicted to increase by 43% over the next 20 years. We've got significant challenges around individuals with multiple long-term conditions. And you will see, as our first colleague said at the beginning, we've got significant variation in life expectancy between our most affluent boroughs and our most deprived areas. So like many health and care systems, in response to these challenges, we are trying to place and have been placing a greater emphasis on supporting people to keep healthy and for them to look after themselves. We are absolutely trying to make the most of new technology, interventions that will improve people's health and well-being, and looking specifically at how education and research and innovation can support us in this space. And Gloucestershire has had quite a strong history in this regard, particularly around its prevention agenda and the work that it's done on things like active communities and active individuals, and our co-production work with our communities. And our local university has been actively involved in some of those adventures so far. Just next slide, please. But then if we look at through this also through our workforce lens, the case for collaboration is also particularly strong from the point of view of the workforce challenges. And I'm sure any of the systems that have spoken today would probably be describing some similar challenges in terms of the current picture. You will have seen on the first slide that we specifically are challenged by a net loss of young people out of Gloucestershire. About 400 people aged between 18 to 30 leave our system every year. And if you place that against the kind of context that we've got around challenges around workforce and recruitment, you will absolutely know that that's not a good thing. We've shared here our overall vacancy rate, but our nurse vacancy rates are much, much higher. And we've got a really high proportion of staff who are aged over 55 years. So if I look at that alone in terms of primary care across Gloucestershire, for example, 31% of nurses and 23% of our GPs are aged 55 years and over. As you will know, there is absolutely high competition for staff across all disciplines. We've got lack of diversity in our senior roles, and therefore if we then look at and think about what we hear from our staff surveys and what it is that we're going to do to tackle some of these things, the relationship and dynamic through education and training and creating opportunities for staff becomes absolutely fundamental and key as part of our overall recruitment and retention strategies. And what we know is that staff absolutely want increased flexibility in their roles. Next slide, please. What we wanted to do is just share with you some practical examples of the things that we have been doing historically in terms of the partnership. Unfortunately, Dr. Amjad Uppal, who's the Medical Director of Gloucestershire Health and Care, wasn't able to join us today. But these were some of the things that were on his list of the joint ventures and initiatives that really illustrate the strength and depth of the partnership. I'm relatively new to Gloucester. I've been here a couple of months, and I have been really, really impressed by the strength of the relationship and the level of dialogue that takes place. Some specific examples to illustrate for you here, and again, I'm sure this happens in many of your own systems, but things like, for example, the review of what are the joint review of the reasons why we have difficulties around student nurse attrition, and then about what is it that we can jointly do around things like pastoral support. There's been a specific initiative around a launch of a digital platform for patient education called eLearn, and that links back to some of the earlier point that I made really about the kind of legacy of and focus that we have in Gloucestershire around things like social prescribing and finding a range of kind of non-medical interventions to support people to stay and live well. Some other things that obviously again are kind of routinely done is that opportunity for joint bidding and funding together, and particularly for things like the NHS digitisation monies. And obviously, again, joint opportunities for research apprenticeships for undergraduate students within the community trust. So all of those, I think, create a really, really sort of strong backdrop for how we now want to take our relationship with the university forward into the next leg of our journey. So I'm now going to hand over to Lorraine Dixon, who will explain to you where we're intending to go next. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, and it's good to be with everybody this afternoon. I mean, I think, as Tracy said, we've got a really solid history and platform now to be taking us on to our next phase. Just to give you a bit of scene setting, that our journey really started around the co-production of education to meet workforce need. I certainly see that as our prime objective, really, as a university in providing that pipeline and flow of new graduates into the various professions within health and social care. And we particularly started around responding to the nursing deficit at the time. When in 2016, we had a significant deficit within the NHS alone. We had 300 vacancies at that time, and that was without the social care on top of that. We started that journey with a co-produced bid to Health Education England to be a fast follower for Nursing Associate programme, and then also adult nursing followed shortly after, followed by another 2 branches of nursing. And that was a systems approach, really, to finding a way forward that filled the hole that we had around workforce. And whilst that hasn't gone away, what we worked really hard to ensure that we were creating a sustainable supply. And so we're just starting to see those graduates coming out now. The first lot qualified during the pandemic of the first groups of nursing. Prior to starting that journey, we looked really hard and carefully about the curriculum, and we're together co-producing that curriculum to make sure it responded to meet the needs of the current workforce, and that graduates could come out and hit the ground running, and particularly around self-care, leadership, and the evidence space. That's really threaded through all of our programs. And as we started with those initial nursing focused, we've now got some 12 subject areas, and also multiple routes. So we have apprenticeships, blended learning, and direct entry. And that's been really important, I think, as a system, because we've started to look at how do we get a diversity within the pipeline and attract people who are particularly local people who are likely to stay local and not leave the county, but also attracting people into the county as well. And in those early days, we pushed these developments forward by the formation of a strategic workforce development partnership board, which was really important, I think, in those early days in giving credibility to the programme of work. When we first started it, we had our chief executives of our local trusts and the vice chancellor, directors of nursing, myself as head of school and project management, because we didn't have a huge amount of health and social care education at the time at the university, and it was chaired by the vice chancellor. So it was it could punch really above its weight at that time, and was really good at shifting things forward. If I move on to the next slide, our vision now, having built what we have in terms of education, is to take it that step forward and to build on that success. We want to look at now co-producing the future through enabling service innovation and transformation, and looking at how do we promote new ways of working. I think if you take the growth of those 12 programs and the multiple routes through those programs, we've generated a significant number of students now. And next year we will hit 1,200 students, which compared to the 300 from where we started is a significant opportunity to output into local economy. But what's been really fantastic is that we've now, as a university, purchased the Debenhams building in the centre of Gloucestershire, which will produce us a focus and for future in terms of how do we creating that more space for growth of the workforce, but also importantly within that we will be developing what we'll call the store, a centre for arts, health and wellbeing. And that builds on some of the philosophies that we've had in the development of all of our programmes, and particularly around self-care. And goodness, we, at the time when we started that journey, we really didn't know how important that was going to be, and that's been tested really to its full through the pandemic. What we're looking to the store to do is to look at the opportunities for new ways of working to complement what happens currently within the NHS systems and social care systems, to really focus on how do we use innovation and transformation to keep people out of hospital, and to promote that healthy living and keep people as well as possible. So the store will provide not only an opportunity to use research and innovation to attract people into the county and to develop our own staff and workforce capability for research and programme change, but also it will generate placement capacity, which we know for our students has been really challenging, particularly over the last 2 years. And although we're starting to recover from COVID and particularly increase that placement capacity again, it's really important that we use new and innovative ways to do that. And we hope that the store as a Centre for Arts and Health and Wellbeing will enable us to do that. If I just move on to the next slide, I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but if you look at the right-hand side of the Debenhams building, which will be our new city campus, is quite a significantly large building, and the top right-hand, probably a third of the building, will be allocated to the Centre for the Arts, Health and Wellbeing. It's currently outlined in the green, and then when we move into phase 2, that'll be phase 1, and phase 2 will bring another classroom size for group therapy. We've designed it in this way really so that it can be fairly flexible space, that it can complement some of the activities and research activities that are already happening. So we've listened really loudly to medical and nursing and social care teams as to what is needed for going forward. We are developing 2 group therapy rooms because we are keen that intervention-based projects that will bring communities of practice together will be really important in supporting people in new ways. We already have a significant number of projects around that utilise social prescribing, and I think in Gloucestershire we've certainly grown that area quite significantly. The Life Science Hub will be something that's a new venture, which will be, or we're currently designing to enable us to pool some of our resources around digital technologies, and to be able to use those for patient benefit, both in education and also opportunities to try out new ways of working. So I think in developing this, the plan for the store, it's really been a collaborative approach, looking at how do we develop a shared vision, and also thinking about what's the business model underneath it to make sure that it's sustainable and will support research and innovation. And whilst we're in the very early stages of that, it's how as organisations we can pool the limited resources that we all have together to make the most effective use of those resources. Looking to their communities, Gloucestershire, I suspect, like many other communities, has a really strong community that philanthropic support will be needed, and engagement with local businesses as well, where there may be some cross-fertilisation of opportunities and ideas for growth. If I just move on to the next slide, please. So as we currently stand, we are currently mapping out 5 work streams that align to our ICS priorities. As I think as a university, it's really key that we make sure that we are there to kind of grow that capability and capacity as we go forward. And to do that, we have aligned these 5 work streams, particularly service innovation through intervention-based projects will be an area that is important in generating new ideas and taking local talent in order to develop some of those ideas. Digital innovation and transformation, boy, what a revolution we've been through over the last 12 months, 2 years. And if somebody had said to me that we would be doing things like this on Teams and supporting patients at that time in such a great way, I'm not sure I would have believed them. But we want to use that learning that we've generated through COVID to take some of this work stream forward and think about, well, how can that make better use of our resources as we go forward? How do we use those big data sets that we are generating to inform service difference or different ways of working and so on? Workforce capability and capacity is key, and it's not going to go away very quickly. And although we've made a huge headway in looking at what does the local need, what is the local need in Gloucestershire, and how do we respond to that and support that within the university, that we want to really understand how do we make that an ongoing, organic and responsive and predictive ways of working. So there may be new roles that we need to generate as different ways of working established, but that will be a really key work stream for us. We've already mentioned social prescribing, promoting a healthy community. And I think particularly in this area, utilising the group therapy rooms that we have and that opportunity to work with, we have a very strong arts consortium in Gloucestershire, working with colleagues in that area to think about new ways of really supporting people who maybe are isolated, vulnerable, and are able to tap into health and social care services in other ways. Sustainability is really important, however we look at that, that threads its way through all of our work streams, but will also, because of the significant importance of this for us at the moment, it's important it has its own theme as well. We've looked at, I'm just conscious of time and we'll draw to a close shortly, but in terms of how do we structure the governance around this, certainly our arts, health and wellbeing, all of the work streams will have a reporting line into the ICS board, into the university executive, and we'll have close monitoring and engagement through Research for Gloucestershire and also our Strategic Workforce Development Partnership Board. Each of these work streams will have a very clear steering group that will establish and monitor each project. I think what's been important as we have developed our programme and our ways of working, that whole systems approach within Gloucestershire, though, is not that we have governance that ties us up in knots, but is that facilitative and helps us to make things happen. And that's, I think, going to be key as we take this next step in making sure that those relationships are continue to be really effective, that they work transparently across our boundaries, and that rather than having suspicion about how one another are working, that we utilise that transparency to increase creativity, that we use it in a way that cements the business model and makes that effective as we go forward. And in particular, that as an education facility, because that's what the Arts, Health and Wellbeing Centre will be, that it helps that ongoing co-production and effective ways of working to make sure that we have a workforce that is capable, has capacity not only to provide excellent care, but also for patients, but also that it is able to generate new ideas and really create service transformation that we need desperately for the future. So we're really still following our philosophy of that system-wide approach, and that generating really strong relationships that are able to initiate change. I hope that maybe we can come back in a year or two's time and give you an updated progress that we and some of the outputs of these work streams. But we're really quite excited by the prospect of the store in taking that forward. I think if I move on to the next slide. And I would just like to say thank you to everybody for listening to us today. And there are our contact details there, and we would love to hear from colleagues who may be interested in connecting with us in future projects, and particularly may have interest in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine and Tracy. I love a health on the high street example, as you will know, so that is absolutely fantastic in Gloucestershire. And can I just say, just before handing over to Jane, it's been a pleasure to hear joint presentations throughout, really refreshing, shows the living relationship we have with each other. And I'm going to introduce Jane now. Jane, please do come in.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you very much to all our presenters for, I think, what's been fantastic in getting a real sense of the kind of way in which these relationships are working practically on the ground, the examples of success, but also an understanding of the challenges and the journey we're on. We've just got a few minutes for questions, and we've got a few questions that have come up in the Q&A, and I just want to really turn to our panelists now. I suppose kind of picking up on this question of sort of the impact and the difference this will make. There's a question from Professor John Goddard around how are we measuring the impact that these collaborations are making? And it may be that we think we're in early stages, but just some reflections from our panel on how we will be able to measure that, particularly where we're outside of what you might call a sort of traditional contractual relationship to deliver. So maybe we could kind of go back to the beginning and sort of see if our colleagues from Newcastle wanted to kick off in response to that a challenging question. Martin.
Mine will be a brief answer. So what we're doing in Newcastle at the moment is trying to think about the move away from outcome-based contracts and new public management models to some of the stuff that both the universities in Newcastle have helped us with around the concept of the human learning system, where actually there'll be bigger benefits from us about spending the time and measuring the learning that we've achieved rather than particular measures and scores on the doors. So one of the ways, John, that we've been doing that is trying to create space to develop all of our senior leaders through joint leadership programs, where they hear about that human learning program, embed it into their individual programs, and spend the time talking about what's the learning that's coming out of each of those. I'm very happy to share details in the chat for some links to that research.
Thanks very much for that, Martin. From Keel's point of view, Krisha and Ruth, anything you'd like to add?
So I guess that there are, I suppose it's like individual cases of success in different ways. So it might be redesign of clinical pathways that are evidence-based. So you've got a new product, something that wouldn't have existed beforehand. So things that are co-produced. Also examples of securing funding to do initiatives that are actually not the university that are driving that. So it's not it's supporting the NHS to secure funding, and we've mentioned the NHSX as one example. Another example is through the Health Foundation and Q Community and Q Lab, and supporting others to get Health Education England funding to take initiatives forward. So again, it's actually seeing that the innovations leave the university and actually have a life of their own and transformed within health and care, and they're taken up as examples and exemplars there, but still lots of areas where we work collaboratively to achieve those individual examples. I don't know if Ruth, you wanted to.
I was going to say, just very practically thinking about some of the numbers of chief investigators coming through. We've got new training and new professors coming through, and new people who've never done research getting involved in research, and coming into the university and getting mentored by the university and working with the university to bring grants in, as Chris has just said. So really working through partnership to get those clinicians, whether they be nurses, social workers, doctors, or even managers such as myself, to really involved in research and taking it forward and going on their own journey, whether it be a clinical academic of the future, whether it be a professor of the future, or just doing evidence-based practice within their own workforce. That's a great impact, what Chris has just said, and using the skills that they're learning and gaining from the mentorship from Keele and the partnership working with Keele to make a difference to their own practice.
Thank you. Some great examples there. And I think you've actually also answered one of the other questions that had come through on the chat in terms of opportunities for funding to support this work. And I think making the point that actually through collaboration, we actually open a much wider pool of potential funding sources where we can drive forward activity. Can I maybe turn to Gloucester and Trace and Lorraine, you said at the end of your presentation, Lorraine, you'd like to come back in a year and tell us how things had progressed. So how will you sort of see success, and how will you be measuring that impact?
So I think, in multiple ways, really. I, like others, I think at the moment we're on a steep trajectory to look at making sure that we secure sustainable funding, and so looking at how we do that, make that business case sustainable for the future is going to be really important. I think in terms of some of the outputs that we would be hoping to see within the year, that we are increasing placement capacity for students, and that enables us to take on board more students into the system. And increase output that way. In terms of our workforce data, looking at the numbers of students that are coming through now and staying within the county, but also being prepared to, and engaged. For example, all our undergraduate students will undertake a change project at the end of their programme. And so what that's hopefully going to generate for the future is that we've got practitioners who are able to hit the ground running at pushing forward innovation and really call out bad practice where it needs to be, and to think about the ways of working differently. Measuring impact is always challenging, but I think that the other area for us all that's really important is how do we make sure that the systems and the new services that we develop are cost effective and economically viable, as well as giving good quality of life for people in our care. So I think I hope that as we go forward, those there'll be some of those measures in each of our projects that we launch over the next year.
Thank you. I think that's great to hear, and I think that kind of sense that actually, as we're evolving, we're seeing this not just as kind of a set of individual projects, but how the system is changing. And there's also a reflection in the questions around the introduction of the integrated care systems, and obviously we'll have ICBs as well. And I'm very conscious we're sort of coming up to the closing minutes, but just interested if any of our panelists would like to reflect on your sort of I guess kind of your hopes and fears of some of the sort of changes that we're seeing around the infrastructure that we're all going to be working with in terms of the way in which the NHS is organised.
I'm happy to come
Tracy.
in. Yes, obviously. So we're on the cusp of a major organisational change from an NHS perspective. We've been talking a lot today, haven't we, about collaboration, and I was just reflecting. The ICB has developed a leadership framework, a value set, a behaviour set, and looking at that and what's contained within that from a Gloucestershire perspective, we do use the term collaborate. We use the term compassionate leadership. We use the term innovate. So I think the ICB needs to sort of hold itself to account in that regard, and collaboration is absolutely one of the key and critical kind of core purposes, I think, of ICSs. And not least because, from a healthcare perspective, we know that only 20% of what we do actually makes a difference to patients. It is all of those other factors, such as where people live, where they work, how they're educated, as everybody knows, that makes that difference. And I think the other thing is that ICSs do know that they have to be different as we go forward. And so I think creating those spaces for those strategic conversations, and how do we become a little bit more braver, and the question that Professor John Goddard has put about securing funding is can we have a mature grown-up conversation about all partners contributing to some agreed priority initiatives, because that is the way that I think we're going to have a better chance of getting things done, as well as opportunities for joint bidding. So I'm really, really hopeful about the future and about what we could do in this context together.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think we're going to have to wrap it up there, but I think the comments and the questions have absolutely helped us to really sort of think about some of those key themes that Michael outlined at the beginning of the session, from the work that we've been doing in terms of how we work together on collaboration, our role as anchor networks, our future-looking approach, our inclusive approach. I think that point about values and how we do things as much as what we do is important, and understanding the impact and the difference we're making have really come through. So I would like to very much thank all our speakers on the session today, Diane and Martin from Newcastle, Chrisia and Ruth from Keele, and Lorraine and Tracy from Gloucester. Thank you very much. Thank you also to my co-chair, Michael Wood from the NHS Confederation. We will now put a feedback poll on in terms of this. Would be really grateful if you would take a moment to have a look at that briefly, and also just to highlight for you that we have some ongoing events as part of our CiviCon22 sessions, so the links will be in the chat if you want to join any other sessions. And also, if you're interested in what you've heard about today, please do visit the website, which again will be available in the chat, for the Civic University Network. Lots of opportunities to learn from others' experience there, but also to share your best practice. So if you have examples you'd like to share with other colleagues, please do contribute to that. And finally, if you do want to keep up to date with all the Civic University Network activity and the progress of this work, please do subscribe to the Civic University Network newsletter. So thank you very much again to our speakers and to you, the audience. I hope you found it a useful session and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you very much.